So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Clark. I am the manager of the Vocation, Education, Employment, and Reentry Unit at the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services, Office of Probation and Correctional Alternatives. Welcome to all of you here from the County Reentry Task Forces, perhaps some service providers, New York State docs, as well as county agencies that represent co-chair positions within the CRTFs. I'm very happy to have you all here today, along with my staff. We have with us today from DCJS, Taylor Alfred, Community Correction Representative 2. I just promoted you, Taylor, from the VERA unit, as well as Frank Cangiano, Community Correction Representative 2 in the VERA unit, and Melinda Vick, Community Correction Representative 2 in the VERA unit. So we are all here from the VERA unit today. VERA is the acronym for Vocation, Education, Employment, and Reentry. We manage all of the 20 county reentry task forces funded by DCJS, as well as the 13 employment-focused services programs, and provide a lot of technical assistance and program support to probation departments, et cetera, in terms of vocation, education, and employment initiatives across the state. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Taylor Alfred first to begin with the virtual etiquette aspect of our webinar today.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Good afternoon, everybody. It's so nice to be here. So nice to see so many names and on our participant window so early into the training. So thank you all so much for signing on so timely, which is a great segue into the virtual meeting etiquette portion of this training, this refresher training that we're offering today. So as we all know, 2 years ago, our world changed and, we experienced COVID-19. Many operations went remote, went completely virtual. And this really changed the way that we do what we do here in reentry and in community correction. And as we come through this pandemic and as we're moving through this very difficult, challenging time, we are finding that many agencies and providers are still utilizing that virtual technology or that virtual operations as part of their workforce operations. And it can be very helpful for many folks to use that virtual technology and to have that option. So just to set the stage for kind of where, our workforce has changed over the last 2 years, there's some statistics here on the slide, and you'll see that, the annual meeting length or how long meetings have been over the last 2 years on a virtual platform such as Zoom, is astronomical. 3.3 trillion is a huge number. The number of webinars that are hosted is large. How many people are signing on to meetings every day has grown, astronomically throughout COVID-19. So just, kind of set the stage for where we have been, but also where we continue to be, just even today being an example of us being remote, offering you this training. As you all know, there are work plan objectives to the CRTF work plan, and virtual technology can be used and is used to accomplish really 6 of the work plan objectives. And you may have different platforms that you're using based on the work plan objective that you're accomplishing. For example, you might be using WebEx to host a training, but you might be using Zoom or FaceTime to have an intake or host a case conference. So, keeping in mind that there are different platforms available to you to utilize depending on the work plan objective you're trying to accomplish, but also you might have various audiences, users, and purpose for that platform. So just remembering to pick the right platform depending on the work plan objective that you are trying to accomplish. As you know, the audiences can vary depending on whether you're having a case conference, you're doing an intake, or you're hosting a bi-monthly meeting. And you often have very high-level people joining you on these calls. So it's just an important reminder to everyone that regardless of the meeting that you're having, whether that be a case conference, an intake, or a bi-monthly, you as coordinators, you as case managers, you as co-chairs, you represent not only your agency, you represent the task force, the county that represents, that the task force is housed in, you represent us here at DCJS, and you also represent docs. So just keeping that in mind when you're hosting your meetings, or you're even attending a meeting or a training, maybe at a neighboring task force. So back in April of 2020, for those of you that were in your position, we did offer it was one of the first trainings that we did in COVID remotely, how to have a more secure meeting. You know, we really took a deep dive into the different platforms that were available without really knowing that this was going to be the world that we live in for the last 2 years. So for just a refresher for those that were able to participate in that training in April of 2020, but also for a lot of the new folks that have been joining the task force since then, you know, it's still important to kind of just go through some of the tips of how to have a more secure meeting. These are some just examples on the screen. Keep in mind every platform is different, and you have to kind of look into what they have available versus, what Zoom might have compared to, Microsoft Teams. So you kind of have to maybe do a little research, but it's really important to always make sure you're using a secure platform, that maybe you have a password associated to the meeting or some sort of waiting room associated, that you always try to identify call-in users, especially when you're in a case conference situation. You're sharing that case-sensitive information. It's really important to have roles when you're hosting a bi-monthly meeting. Maybe you have your presenter role, you have a host role, you have somebody else employed at the task force that can help you kind of with that technology and behind the scenes. It just makes for a smoother training, a smoother meeting, and it does take a little bit of the pressure off your shoulders as well. So again, these are just some of the more useful tips or more common tips on how to have more of a secure meeting. So we were putting together this PowerPoint for you all. We were kind of looking at, what sort of information or research is out there about the virtual world that we live in and virtual meetings and trainings. And we found this survey that was done in 2020 of more than 2,000 individuals. And what was interesting is that the survey found that a majority of individuals are checking emails during a virtual meeting, which we all probably are guilty of at some point or another. But it is important to remember that we don't necessarily want our attendees to be doing this, nor should we be doing this when we're a participant or even hosting a meeting as well. This chart is really just to remind folks, to be a little bit more conscientious about how you're conducting yourself. And obviously we understand, the control of individuals that attending your meetings can be really challenging, and we'll provide some tips on how to handle that. But it is interesting that we have found, and we probably have all experienced it, we probably have all seen it, the various different off-task behaviors that are occurring during these virtual meetings and trainings. So some do's and don'ts. Like I said, we've all witnessed those, cringeworthy moments when you're sitting on a training or a meeting, and sometimes those things are out of your control. But some key things to remember is always essential that you're polite and cheerful. That includes your tone of voice, your smile, you show confidence if you're on camera. We always encourage our program to utilize agendas. Not only does it keep meetings kind of on task, but it allows just that interaction between you and your meeting participants. You can always share the agenda beforehand. It definitely does give your meeting participants a little sneak peek or a snapshot as to what you are going to discuss at that meeting. It's really hard, and I'm trying to do it today because I'm talking about it, but looking at the camera and making eye contact with your meeting participants, your screen is really important. Think about if you were in person, you would be doing that. You'd probably be picking somebody else out of a crowd, maybe making eye contact with them, and just, remembering to do those things even when you're in a virtual world. We always encourage our folks to just participate as you would if you were in person. It's really hard to be tempted to switch tabs and to do some other work, or maybe fill out your time card while you're at a training or something. Just really try to be more conscientious about closing those windows down and focusing on the meeting or the training. And if you do have to do, some sort of work, maybe turning off the camera, stepping away, do that, and then coming back. We don't expect anyone here to be an expert in hosting virtual meetings, nor am I. But we do hope that you'll have a little bit more, gained more comfortability or more comfort when it comes to hosting these meetings, knowing how to mute people, knowing how to share a screen, knowing how to provide a little bit of a technical assistance during a meeting can be really helpful, because not only does it show your confidence, but it just makes the meeting run so much smoother. And we've all been on those meetings where we want to mute someone because we hear that noise in the background. So, remembering to do that or having someone that can help you do that, it just makes a much more enjoyable experience for anyone that's attending your meetings. And lastly, we've talked about this in a couple other presentations over the last few months, but when you have a presenter, you as a coordinator or, even co-chairs, you kind of act a little bit as a moderator, maybe have some questions prepared in advance that you want to ask that person. The worst is when you're on a meeting and you hear that presentation and you say, oh, does anyone have any questions? And it's crickets, and it's hard. And especially in that virtual world. So maybe having a question or a topic you want to throw out there kind of gets the conversation going, gets people feeling comfortable coming off mute or using a chat to ask questions. Okay, so now for the don'ts. We've all seen and been in those meetings, like I said, where someone's eating, sleeping, maybe having conversations with people in the same room, or they're on the phone while their camera's on. And it's really hard. It's hard as a host, it's hard as a presenter, and it's hard as an attendee to see that. And we recognize that some of that behavior is just out of your control as a meeting host. And as much as you want to, control everyone, you just can't. But you can control maybe, the ability to mute individuals. You can start a meeting or a training with a brief overview and set reminders about etiquette. Sometimes, you just need that reminder that, hey, if you get a phone call while you're on this bi-monthly meeting, just turn off your camera, make sure you're unmuted. That setting that tone can really help your meeting or your presentation. And it also just, provides that respect to your presenter as well. Again, it is important to remember that we represent, your task force, you represent docs, you represent DCJS, your respective agency. So just a couple don'ts when it comes to virtual meetings. Again, we want to behave as we would in person. Don't want to make distracting sounds. You try not to have side conversations. Don't do that work simultaneously. Don't eat on camera, at least. And if you are eating, make sure that camera's off and you're muted. Nothing like seeing someone take a big bite into a sandwich on a training. I can tell you it's happened before. So, just keep those things in mind. I know we all know this, but, we're still living in this world, and we hope that this really just acts as a little bit of a refresher, a reminder, and might give you some tips about how to move into your bi-monthly meetings and your case conferences moving forward. So that being said, speaking of case conferences, I'm going to turn it over to Melinda Vick, who is going to take a deep dive into the case conferencing committee. And Melinda, I will advance the slides for you.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay? We'll start there. Awesome. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start by just saying thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I will say that in terms of this particular conversation regarding the Case Conference Committee, it has been a topic of conversation for a couple of years now where we've really wanted to do this and put this on. There's been some turnover in staff lately, and we thought that, you know what, now is a good time to just do a refresher. As Taylor mentioned, on the DCJS website under the Reentry tab, you can find any of the lunch and learns and topics that we have discussed in the past. If you would like to go view those on your own time, please feel free to do so. Many of them are under an hour long and can give you a lot of good information on bi-monthlies, the virtual tech, anything really you would like some information on. But let's talk about case conference committees. So case conferencing is defined as a formal, planned, and structured event with interdisciplinary professionals, which must include your New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision staff, AKA your New York State docs. The case conference committee meetings are held biweekly at minimum, as some county reentry task forces, or CRTF, hold them much more often. These meetings are held this often in order to review referred cases and to begin working on referrals to services immediately upon release from state incarceration. However, case conference committees could be scheduled in addition to new referrals in order to discuss problematic cases and/or individuals who are not engaging at this time. CRTFs must also include a plan to provide a CBI and/or employment readiness program to an individual. It is an expectation of DCGS that CRTFs discuss at the case conference committee meeting the potential of providing at least one of these types of interventions to an individual after their release. As many of you know, each CRTF has to provide at least one CBI or employment readiness program, and each one of you are different and unique in and of yourselves. It should also be noted that a case conference can be held virtually, in person, or hybrid, and doing a little bit of both depending on the needs of each county. Throughout each and every case conference, I can tell you one thing is the most important thing, and that is communication is key. Having that open and clear communication between your docs representative, your service providers, and yourself as coordinators can make that process be much more seamless. So, how should I prepare? What is it that I should do? You've got all this information. What do I do with it now? So case conferences are used for both pre-release cases, post-release cases, and then maximum expiration cases. So for pre-release planning, some CRTF coordinators have an opportunity to do some in-reach with correctional facilities. Each one of you have different working relationships. And while this is great, it's not necessarily available for every and all CRTFs. But if you can do so and gain information, that is great. Keep in mind, walk-in referrals, which are when individuals who are on supervision come to your office prior to having a verified pre- or post-release referral from docs, also need to be brought to the case conference committee. They can walk in and ask for help. Yes, you can assist them, but you also need to be able to case conference them and get the proper documentation for them. Case conferences are documented in the participant's record. Remember, you have to have verified case file documentation, and that's one of them. The agenda for the case conference committee is typically standard, and that referral information is reviewed and intervention/service referrals are discussed. A review of all the referral packet information, required case file documentation is necessary prior to the meeting. Upon review, you should note any possible questions you may have. Some areas to address may be the following: following up on the approved address and just checking to ensure contact information matches. Double check on any medical issues and/or mental health status. Any parole conditions that have been added or need to be addressed per your doc's person that's sitting in there. Many points of information can be accessed or clarified through the New York State docs computer system, not just through their CMS, their community supervision tool, but also through the FPMS correctional facility side of their computer system. There's two different sides that they're able to utilize. This is the case conference time to gather any necessary information that you may have questions on. You're reading the referral, you're not sure, you have some questions, jot them down so at the case conference committee, you're able to ask those questions. The more information obtained, the better understanding you're going to have of the individual and their needs. Maximum expiration cases. These cannot be discussed with any New York State doc staff, mainly because a maximum expiration case means that they're no longer under the care and custody of the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. They're done. They've been released. As such, a taper should have been received from the correctional facility prior to release, and any discussion regarding a Max X case participant should be held to the end of the case conference committee, and the New York State docs representative should be afforded the opportunity to then exit the meeting so that you can discuss the case without their presence. All right, case conference committee. What do you need? But what if I don't have it? Then what do I do? All right, so let's talk about it. The documents, the compass, the taper, the CMS F6 screens, as well as consent, are extremely important and helpful in forming the initial service coordination plan that's developed at the initial case conference and then further developed at the intake stage with the individual. This service coordination plan is also approved and must be shared with the New York State docs representative, specifically the assigned parole officer, right? So you can always refer to the quick reference guide. It's a PDF that we provided by DCJS not too long ago. We provided them during the regional forums as well as prior to that when we were making some of the changes in the referral process. If you don't have it, we are more than happy to provide it. The Compass Reentry will provide valuable insight to the CRTF coordinator to ensure that the criminogenic needs are targeted with interventions such as a CBI like T4C, T4C booster, many of you like interactive journaling, or MRT, and or also the employment interventions such as CBI EMP or Ready, Set, Work. You know, research really has supported that the utilization of CBI and employment readiness services for those with pro-criminal thinking, negatively influencing peers, low academic achievement, little to no employment skills or experience, substance abuse issues, and failing discord communication issues are going to be helpful to this particular individual, which is why we focus on them so heavily. They are useful to the individuals that we are servicing. It is helpful to bring a service coordination plan template, whatever choice that you are using, whether it be the DCJS template that has been made available to you or one of your own. If you bring this to the meetings, I think you'll find it helpful to share a copy of a blank plan with your committee so that they're familiar with your template and they know what you're looking at and what you're looking to do. So the next question is, what if you don't have what you need? You just stop, you give up, you throw your hands up, say, nope, I'm done, don't have it, can't go forward. I don't think so. Many of you are very savvy when it comes to getting what you need. But first, you cannot case conference or even discuss a case unless, at the very least, you have an obtained signed consent form or because of COVID-19, you know that it has been documented that a verbal consent was made with community supervision. So those are your two options to know that the individual has consented to receiving services and the parole officer is aware of this. We understand there are times when the entire referral packet may not be completed at the time of case conference. However, you should never have to cancel the meeting. The case conference is the mechanism that begins the process of accessing services to returning citizens. Should the referral source fail to give you every piece of referral packet, the meeting can still proceed, especially if you have the referral. That has the majority of the information that you need on it. The meeting should proceed as planned, and you should ask docs any and every question you need answered to make the initial service coordination plan recommendations. However, if not even a referral was received, then this may indicate that that particular case, just that case, should be postponed to maybe your next case conference. But the rest of the case conferences should go on. Every effort should be made to keep your New York State Docs co-chair aware of missing referral packet information so that they are kept informed of any breakdowns in communication with field staff. Keeping in mind that New York State Docs is the only referral source for our CRTF. Docs is the only referral source. You cannot receive any other referrals from probation or outside service providers. Only Docs can refer to the CRTF. All right, this is an important one. So, who should attend? Who should we have coming to the table? Because we can't do it by ourselves, and we can't do it with just myself as a coordinator and perhaps a Docs representative. We need service providers. So members of the case conference committee should include your Docs community supervision representative, whether it be a reentry manager, a reentry assistant manager at times, but most of the time you're going to have a parole officer or a supervising parole officer coming to your case conference. Then we also have the CRTF coordinator. Perhaps any of their staff, like a case manager, may come to the case conference. We typically have a local DSS commissioner or designee or delegate, local mental health commissioner, designee, delegate, housing services, health homes, and any other service that is deemed necessary to create a preliminary service coordination plan to best serve the needs of the referred participants. It should be noted that a case conference cannot operate or proceed without a Docs staff member. They are pivotal to the happenings of the case conference, and they're also the primary resource to accessing the computerized and or file information of the participant. So you really can't go on if you don't have a Docs representative on the call or at the table. So in front of you, you're going to see some examples on the slide of who may attend your case conference, but it's not limited to just these individuals. It could also include a veterans representative if you know the person is a veteran coming home. The health homes individual could be there. You could have any type of special service provider that's in your community that may be specific to that particular community. It's also been noted that some CRTFs are struggling to get necessary service providers to some case conference, and I want to take a second to address that as well. If you cannot get service providers to come to the case conference, You are encouraged to seek out some help, whether it be to ask other coordinators for advice or input by utilizing the listserv and asking other coordinators, hey, how do you get service providers? How do you entice them to come to the case conferences? Or utilizing the services that you have as a team, such as your co-chairs, whether it be your county co-chair or your DOCS co-chair, who also may have different ideas as to which service providers would be interested in coming and helping at the case conferences. Use what you have next to you. Use the services that are right there next to you. Your co-chairs are always great individuals to work with, and I know for a fact that they're willing to help.
Melinda, can I jump in there for something real quick?
Absolutely.
So to piggyback what Melinda had just said with respect to utilizing who you've got, to help garner more representation at your case conference committee meeting, the co-chairs of the county reentry task forces, are there for, a very important reason. They bring to this process, a level of importance and status and a community, I guess, investment, if you will. When a probation director or a mental health commissioner, or a public defender's office comes to the table to be a co-chair of a county reentry task force, it shows their investment in this process, which trickles down into the community and helps the community to become more invested. So utilize your co-chairs as well when you need perhaps someone from your local DSS, or let's just say someone from the housing program to come to the table, because for whatever reason you're having difficulty getting them there. Maybe they're, you've lost a staff member there at some point in time in that particular service, and then they never replace them. I mean, there's a million different reasons why these things happen, but our co-chairs have been very, very helpful in getting support from local providers, local directors, commissioners, etc. Having the probation director or mental health commissioner do that type of outreach on behalf of the CRTF as a co-chair is very helpful and beneficial. They help their titles and their positions and the reputations that they have hold a lot of weight in the county. DA's offices down in the New York, City region, they hold a lot of weight. So they are able to bring people in to your process here, to the membership of the CRTF. So I just wanted to mention that really quick as well. I think you're planning on turning it over to me now anyway, Melinda.
I was just going to say, you took it at a great spot because it's your turn.
Thank you. So I'm just going to touch base on a few things here, if you don't mind, everyone. And thank you so much for being here again. I know we talked a lot about some virtual etiquette at the beginning, which is, we meant that to be light, a brief, overview of the things that are important that we see these days in some of these meetings, and just to kind of remind us all how important it is that we are, be professional at all times when it comes to holding our meetings. Having a sip of coffee, having a drink of water is not the same as eating, obviously, but we just want to make sure that we are really showing our community at our bi-monthlies, as well as at our case conference committee meetings, that we are really there to get the job done and make the meeting as productive and efficient as possible. So with respect to expectations and accomplishments for the CRTF, there are some really important things that are done at this case conference. Determining someone's criminogenic and stabilization needs are critical to helping them succeed in the community. So that's what we're doing at this meeting. And a review of the Compass Reentry Narrative and Legacy Bar Chart is where you get that information from, in addition to the referral. So having that chart, having that bar chart, the legacy bar chart, the narrative, and going through that in advance, if possible, is key. It's key to creating the service coordination plan. It's important that we have DOCS participation, of course, in this plan, and having them at the table for the case conference committee gives you that opportunity, as Melinda said earlier, to ask any outstanding questions that may exist. What we don't want to see happening at a case conference committee meeting is DOCS reading, word for word from the screen, pretty much telling us all the things we already know for those of us at the case conference committee meeting. Why do we already know it? Because we have the compass, we have the narrative and legacy bar chart, we have the CMS screen, we have the referral. Yes, there is some information that does need to be read in terms of some of the mandates, some of the, whether or not someone's domiciled or undomiciled, things of that nature. But what we really hope happens at the case conference committee is that the coordinator or the individual responsible for running the meeting, for advancing the meeting, have an agenda and say, here's case A. based on the review of the Compass reentry and the information that comes along with the packet of, referral packet, this is what we see in terms of stabilization needs and criminogenic needs, and then have that information vetted by your docs representative at the meeting. We can absolutely say without question that we've sat in on every single case conference for every single CRTF over the past several years, at least once, and that you're all really, really, on par for making these case conferences work to your advantage. I think someone may have been unmuted. Hold on one moment. We good? Okay. And I just wanted to say that it's important that you continue to strive, to ensure that you are talking about the stabilization and criminogenic needs, developing that service coordination plan that is so important to the success of the person that's coming into the reentry task force. And we really want you to be able to talk to the service providers within your case conference committee about what they think could be helpful to address any barriers or concerns relative to the criminogenic or stabilization needs. I want to ask a question. I wasn't planning on doing this, but now that we're here, I think I should use our time wisely. Could everyone who has access to the chat please do me a favor and list a criminogenic need? Just really quickly, just throw anything you want in there. One criminogenic need into the chat. Great. Perfect. Wonderful. Lots of things. Okay, domestic violence, employment. So, yeah. Substance abuse, vocational needs. Yeah, peers, absolutely. Financial issues, violence, aggression, things of that nature, yes. So we have a lot of things in the chat that definitely are criminogenic needs. What we also have in the chat right now are a whole bunch of stabilization needs in here as well, which I was hoping to see as well, but I want to differentiate. So stabilization needs are those needs that are required to be addressed so that the individual can live, can survive, can function within society. Now, you can certainly function, eat, sleep, drink, take care of yourself to some degree, basically, without addressing your criminogenic needs. So stabilization needs are things like housing, your medical, your mental health, food, childcare, transportation, your benefits that you need, public assistance, etc. Those are stabilization needs. All of the other things I named having to do with criminogenic needs are things such as substance abuse, your anger management history, domestic violence history, substance abuse. I think I said that already. Your negative social cognitions, the way you think impacts the way you act. Employment, lack of vocation, education, employment resources or training. Those are all of our criminogenic needs. Peers, things that we have to address to reduce recidivism. So I just wanted to do that little exercise, and thank you guys for participating. That was great of you guys. I want to emphasize again, reviewing concerns related to the participant, because not only do we do a case conference for pre-release and post-release cases coming into the CRTF, we also have the opportunity to do a review of open cases when time allows within a case conference committee meeting to talk about whether or not there are some barriers or gaps that can be addressed by the providers at the table. In some county reentry task forces, what we see are docs kind of leading the charge and giving information on the cases. In other county reentry task forces, we see the coordinator presenting the referrals and asking for input, recommendations, services, etc. No one county reentry task force is the same. We would certainly like you to keep in mind the fundamental purpose of the meeting, and that is to discuss the most appropriate referrals and services to address the needs of the participant. That's the purpose of the meeting. One of the connections that I think is important that's also made at a case conference meeting is sometimes the ability to schedule an appointment for someone who's coming out of state incarceration or who just came out with a service provider at the table. And we are going to show you an example of how that works in just a little bit with a mock case conference committee meeting that we are going to conduct a little bit later on in this webinar. So those are the things I just wanted to highlight in this particular slide for expectations and accomplishments. Melinda, I can do the next slide since I'm still here and then I'm jumping into 17 anyway, if you are okay with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So rather than turning back over to Melinda to do one slide and then me jumping again, I'll just take care of the CRTF guidance document and case conference objectives. So what we have here is that we have, all of you should have, and if you don't, please reach out to either Melinda or Taylor, your guidance document for kind of the governance over how the CRTFs function, the model. And remember that appropriate case file documentation is important, okay, for an audit purpose, for a site visit purpose, things of that nature. There needs to be consents. There has to be a consent form signed by the participant or, at the star notates, per the COVID-19 guidance, verbal consents are still accepted until otherwise noted. We also want you to provide any additional needs or responsivity assessments that you may be providing. And I wanted to just mention that we are going to probably be having another webinar very soon on some other assessments that you could be using within your CRTFs other than just the Compass Reentry. There are many, many other needs and responsivity assessments out there, but stay on the lookout for that coming up in the future. Lastly, I want to just mention the required reporting and the CCDS. That's what we call it, the Community Corrections Data Submission. I know you're all very familiar with the CCDS application. It should be noted that the most recent CRTF required data entry fields in the Community Corrections Database Submission application is dated 10/6/2021. And that defines the case conference as the date when the case conferencing committee first reviews the CRTF referral packet. Only enter a case conference date for individuals who receive service coordination by the CRTF. So if an individual comes in for case conferencing, folks, but doesn't ever have an intake appointment or get a service coordination plan, we won't be counting them in the CCDS. I just want to reemphasize that for those of you who are newer to the CRTF and you may be doing data submission in the CCDS. So I just wanted to offer that. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay. So this is where we are going to do an activity with you all. And for the purposes of this activity, before I bring her in, we have asked someone from New York State Docs to participate with us. So we'd like to say thank you to Sarah Donlin. Sarah, please unmute yourself if you can, just to do an audio check and mic check for us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, could you just briefly tell us what area you cover?
Sure. I am the reentry manager for the Central New York region. So we cover 20 counties, Plattsburgh to Syracuse, Utica, Watertown, and also Rensselaer County as well.
So you're the Docs co-chair for Rensselaer, Onondaga, Oneida?
Correct.
Okay. Just those three? Well, that's a lot.
Yes, those three.
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. So in this activity, we just want to talk to you about the New York Compass Reentry. We want to talk to you about the actual, way to interpret this and look at this. And for some of you, this may be the first time you're doing it with us. For others, you've probably seen it lots and lots of times. But for the purposes of today's webinar, we just want to show you what we would be looking for. The importance of understanding this assessment tool and the results is cannot be overemphasized. This is a validated risk and need assessment used by Docs. It assesses a person's risk of felony offense, risk of arrest, and risk of absconding, as well as all of the needs in green below. It assesses the criminogenic needs, which are the green areas: criminal history involvement, history of violence, prison conduct, misconduct, relationships, lifestyle characteristics such as substance abuse issues, personality, attitudes, including whether or not the individual has a likelihood for negative social cognitions, low self-efficacy, family support, social exclusions, such as their financial status upon release, as well as their employment expectations and history. There's a lot of information in here, which is why we'd like you to review it in advance of the case conference committee, if at all possible. There's also a narrative that I'm sure you've seen before that covers each of these sections that are bolded. Once the case conference committee has identified with the community supervision these needs to be addressed, a plan to refer this participant to a DCJS approved CBI or employment readiness program can be developed as well. And that's really what we're going to try to focus on here today, as well as a few other of the other stabilization and service needs that goes into creating a preliminary case plan, service coordination plan rather, that starts at the case conference. So basically just a little bit about this individual that we're going to talk about today. His name is John Doe, male, 34 years old. His offense at arrest was armed robbery. He has a parole officer by the name of James Smith, and his release date is May 15th, 2022. I'm sorry, I think I have that wrong. May 1st, 2022. I apologize. There are assumptions that we want you to take into consideration here for this particular case study. Each provider within a county reentry task force is county specific. You won't see the same providers at every case conference committee meeting if you were to visit another case conference, sit in at another case conference. But what you're doing within each county, my assumption is that you're selecting individuals whom you feel are the most important for the participants that you're working with. People that you can depend on to come to your case conference committee meeting, reliable individuals, and people who have a lot of experience or at least have some way of communicating, networking, etc., within the community to provide helpful services to participants coming out of state incarceration. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we're addressing these needs. So by looking at the Compass Reentry here, you're not seeing stabilization per se. What you're seeing are criminogenic needs. You're seeing history of violence that's pretty high, prison misconduct very high, substance abuse is highly probable, negative social cognitions and low self-efficacy, highly probable, huge. That screams to us that this person is in need of a cognitive behavioral intervention. The low family support is unlikely, which is good news. But the social exclusion also has some high probability with reentry, financial issues, and employment expectations. So moving right along, I am going to share my screen. Give me a moment. I'm praying this works. My virtual etiquette. Does anybody see it? Or do you see the wrong thing? Did anybody
It was
see?
up, but then it just went away.
Oh, was it there?
Yeah.
It was there, sorry.
Okay. So this is the Reentry Service Coordination Plan. That's what you should be seeing on your screen. Correct?
Good.
Okay. So for all intents and purposes right now, 12:43, for the next 15 minutes or maybe less, hoping you guys maybe have some questions or some comments, we're going to do a mock case conference committee meeting. And we're going to ask Sarah Donlin from DOCS to join us. She'll be the DOCS representative at this case conference committee meeting. I'll be the coordinator of the CRTF. We're not choosing a location. And Melinda Vick is going to be a representative from a local DSS. Taylor Alford is going to be a representative from a local contracted agency to provide services to a county reentry task force participant. And Frank Cangiano is going to be a representative from a service provider in the county that we're working within. So the five of us rather, are going to be unmuted from time to time to interact as though we were in a virtual case conference committee meeting. So as the coordinator in front of me, I have my reentry service coordination plan. That's what I choose to have in front of me. You could have notes, you could have an agenda, you could have a notebook, whatever the case may be. But this is how I would elect to do my case conference committee meeting. With the individuals, Compass Reentry, CMS F6 screen information, referral, etc., taper next to me in case I needed to review anything at the time. So right from the bat, we have the information up the top about, who this individual is, and we're looking at the major needs, areas of concern that we want to talk about based on the Compass Reentry that we just looked at. So we see employment, we see substance abuse for these two up here. We see a cognitive behavioral program necessity here because of what we looked at with negative social cognitions and low self-efficacy. And we see that there's a housing issue. And I should have mentioned when we talked about John Doe in this case study, there is going to be somewhat of a housing issue with this individual. And you will hear that when we start talking within our mock case conference committee meeting. So, okay. So at this point in time, I'd like to present John Doe, again, male, age 34, coming back into County X. And at this point in time, we have a situation where the individual is going to be staying with parents, but it's not stable. So what are we going to do at this point in time? What would be
This is Sarah. I just want to note that the individual has a stabilization need for housing. His current housing plan is noted as temporary, so the need for stable long-term housing is going to be his #1 priority.
Thank you. So with that being said, and having reviewed the Compass reentry and the information that was provided, we have decided to list this as the #1 need for the individual. Remember again, stabilization, it's about survival. It's about giving the individual the basic needs, helping them meet their basic needs so that they can participate in other aspects, of their lives. So thank you, docs. So that's going to be listed as the #1 need. An explanation of the problem here. Individual has parents who are unable to keep the participant at their home beyond May 15th. So the goal, as stated by Ms. Donlin, was very clear. He's in need of stable long-term housing. What we would need that individual to do would be seek housing assistance, right? Through a local DSS, by applying for rental assistance, or coming up with some other plan that he or she determines is appropriate. However, we at the CRTF level, my job is to assist that individual by connecting him with a staff member of the rental assistance program, if that's what he decides he would like to do, advising him of the necessary applications to complete for assistance, etc. Provide participant with the hours of operation for local DSS, if that's where he's choosing to go and get help, and make an initial call to that housing unit to connect the participant to service. Now, I keep referencing if this is what he wants, because this is what he wants. The service coordination plan does have to be approved, agreed upon by the participant. We're trying to give him the best advice, counsel, based on what we know about the community. And we know that local DSS can help with respect to rental assistance for someone that's just coming out of state incarceration and needs assistance. This individual does not have a transportation need for this, does have a transportation need for this particular need. And what we have as a solution is that the CRTF can provide bus passes to the participant, and that the CRTF can provide the participant with a bus schedule to show them how to navigate the transit system. So this is what we're doing for need 1 at our case conference committee meeting. And we've scheduled an appointment for the individual to be able to meet with someone at the local DSS. Now, I also negated to mention, as I'm getting down further in this, I know Melinda probably noted it too, because she's smiling at me, that this is an individual who is not yet here. He is a pre-release case. He's coming out very, very soon. So we were able to, because of our relationship with Ms. Vick and our county, make an appointment for him to come in as soon as he comes out to be able to assist him with this particular need. Thank you.
Yes. So, Ms. Coordinator, as DSS representative, we did a check in our system and we looked, and it looks like our guy here actually has no restrictions in our system. He had active DSS assistance prior to going into incarceration. He has no restrictions at this time. So we can set up an appointment for him upon release, and I will give you a date and time for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next need we're going to be addressing, if you can refer back to what you were looking at with the bar chart before, is the negative social cognitions and the low self-efficacy. That particular piece of the bar chart is really, really indicative of someone who needs to change their thinking. It's very important. And how do we help individuals who are coming into the County Reentry Task Force change their thinking to more healthier, pro-social thoughts? We ask them, we try to engage them in a cognitive behavioral intervention. Okay, so the need established, the problem, the participant's thoughts, choices, and actions have resulted in a long criminal history, violence, high risk of arrest. This places him at high risk to reoffend. So one of the main tenets of the County Reentry Task Forces is to provide cognitive behavioral interventions and employment readiness to individuals coming out of state incarceration. So the goal would be to work with the CRTF contracted agency staff who will work with the participant upon intake and beyond to address thoughts, feelings, and feelings that lead to criminal behavior. The long-term goal would be to change negative criminal thinking to positive pro-social thinking, which will result in more positive behaviors and problem-solving skills. So this would be where we would talk to Ms. Taylor Alfred, who is from a contracted agency within the CRTF, Case Conference Committee.
Yeah, so I can definitely help this individual out. We run interactive journaling here at my agency. We do either weekly 1-hour sessions for 12 weeks, or we have an option of doing 2-hour sessions for 6 weeks. We facilitate the Courage to Change series, and we can accommodate the individual's schedule based on any other program needs he or he may have. So we can definitely work with him. And our next class will be starting shortly after his release date.
Thank you. Thank you. So that will be something that is being entered now into the preliminary service coordination plan at the Case Conference Committee meeting. And what we have is possible, anticipated barriers of a transportation issue, but what we know based on his address and based on the proximity of to the contracted agency, that for now that transportation will not be an issue based on the information we have right now. However, what we know is also that the individual will have to move eventually because of the unstable housing situation. So again, thankfully, our CRTF can provide bus passes to the individual to provide transportation once he relocates to more stable housing. And then the last one that we want to address today, based on the bar chart that we looked at, was employment, which will also impact financial status of the individual. So with this particular individual, the participant is unemployed, coming out of state incarceration without a job and no prospects that we know of. But the individual will likely want to have a stable long-term employment to be able to support himself. So again, this is the preliminary service coordination plan that we're developing based on the conversation and the needs that are addressed at the Case Conference Committee meeting. So what will the participant do? The participant could be referred to attend the Ready, Set, Work Employment Readiness Program. And with this program particularly, I would be providing the service. I am the person that works with CRTF participants right through the task force to deliver RSW. I would be able to deliver this class to this individual 2 times per week for 5 weeks, Tuesday and Thursdays, and be able to do makeup sessions as they are needed for the individual in case something very serious emergency, comes up and he's unable to come to programming. I will address employment barriers, resume writing, interview preparation, and many other aspects of the job readiness training program to assist the participant in obtaining and maintaining employment. There doesn't appear to be a transportation issue at this time because of his proximity to the CRTF office. But if there does result in having, a transportation issue, I will be able to provide bus passes to the individual. So that is another need that we can address on the service coordination plan in advance of meeting the individual and presenting this information to the participant based on the needs that we've seen in the Compass reentry. I said that was the last one, but that's not the last one. We have one more, and it's a service provider related recommendation. So as you saw on the Compass bar chart, there was a high probability for a substance abuse need. And that being said, we identified that on the service coordination plan, the preliminary plan, and the participant is dependent on illicit drugs and or alcohol. So goal would be for abstinence and recovery from substance abuse. And at this point in time, I'd like to refer over to the service provider, Frank Cangiano, a substance abuse agency.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Coordinator. I know that when reading that bar chart, I saw that it was a very, very high need for substance abuse evaluation and treatment. We at Freedom and Fairness Counseling Associates, or FFCA, we are an OASIS certified treatment provider, and we can get John to an evaluation appointment really close to his release. So we can schedule a substance abuse evaluation for him right away on May 4th at 12:30, and to get him into our program, to get him evaluated, to assess his substance abuse needs during that time. So I can certainly make that happen to schedule that appointment quickly.
Thank you. And all this information that's been taken down and put into this preliminary service coordination plan will be brought with me to the initial meeting with the participant once he is released and back home in our county. And this will be very helpful in defining for him what those needs were or are in the county reentry task, or I'm sorry, the Compass reentry, and also sharing with this individual what was discussed and what was supported by community supervision. If you notice this aspect right here on the service coordination plan, all of these services are supported, not necessarily mandated, but at the very least supported by the parole officer who is working with this individual, or at least the parole representative, community supervision representative at the community's conference committee, who is speaking on behalf of docs. So these are important things to remember in doing a case conference committee meeting. We realize that lots of conversations go awry and that there are sometimes crises and other things that make us wind and turn throughout reviewing these cases. But in a perfect world, which we don't live in, this is the kind of structure that could be helpful to county reentry task forces in ensuring that individuals' needs are being addressed in their case plans, both stabilization and criminogenic. And those criminogenic needs are the ones that result in higher recidivism if they are not addressed. So with that being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, go back to the actual PowerPoint here today. I wonder if there's anyone, I'm looking at the chat right now, I want to see if anyone popped anything in there while I was talking or while any of us were talking today. No one. So at this time, I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions or comments. Do you think that was a little far-fetched for a case conference committee meeting mock session? Do you think that that was pretty close to how your case conferences go? In the ballpark somewhere? Could anyone maybe put some information into the, oh, thanks, Tim. Tim Staples said, good job. Thanks, Tim.
Hey, Michelle.
In the ballpark, Audrey Thompson said. Hi, Audrey. Hi, Gary.
Hey, Michelle. Listen, for the most part, the way you explained the case conferences, the way mine is run. So I ain't trying to pat myself on the back for that, but we more or less do that anyway. Yeah. So one thing I wasn't aware of, I'm glad you brought it to my attention. When we do the max cases, I wasn't aware that docs should not be present when we do those things. I wasn't really sure of that. So the one right,
yeah,
so
don't have them there. They have no input to provide for max X cases. We want to kind of remove them from that process as best we can. We did cover that in our CRTF new processes meetings going back last year, but it's something you couldn't miss. But no harm, no foul.
Yeah, I mean, it's just good information. It's good to know. So now that I'm aware, so that was really impressive. I was also impressed that Frank came up with that.
Me too.
Substance abuse place on the fly. I mean, that was really good stuff, right? I mean, you know.
Yeah, he didn't tell us what he was going to call his program until right then.
He told the name and everything. Wow, that was really impressive.
Thank you.
But for real, I mean, really good information. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. And we do have a lot of content here in the chat, and I really appreciate it. The content is similar coming from Monroe County. We just move a bit quicker to make sure we can cover all cases in a timely manner. That's fine. Just as long as, I have a question too, real quick, and we're almost done. Can you put in the chat, anybody? Yes, you're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint. It's going to be on the DCJS website. It's made public for you very soon. Can anybody tell me if they have any difficulty getting people together for the case conference committee meeting? Just, I'm going to watch to see who says yes. I feel like it would be helpful for us to know who's having a lot of difficulty getting people there to that case conference committee meeting. There's no concerns in Oneida. Very good. Yep, very good. Oh, housing representatives. Yes, yes. I mean, that's pretty consistent. Yes, competing meetings sometimes. Yeah, I mean, housing is difficult. Again, Franz in Long Island, speak to your co-chairs. They know who to contact for housing. Please ask them to work with you and reach out to some housing providers or social services or down in the city, I believe you have a specific housing program to be able to help you get someone at the table for that. That's very, very important. We recently just asked Niagara County co-chairs, John Cicchetti and Brianna, to help us get more individuals involved in the case conference committee there. So, and we've done the same thing in Erie not too long ago. So this is something that we've been doing for a long time, is using our, or not using, but asking our county reentry task force co-chairs to really help us bring people into the fold.
I think you got a couple questions and they might have gotten buried, Michelle. So one of the questions was just really quick. Some of the newer coordinators are asking, the guidance document states that it's 2019-2020. Do we have any updated one? And the answer to that is no. However, most of the content within the 1920s is the same, and any of the updates that have changed, we have sent out in either memorandum form or in an email form, so that like the referral process has changed since then. There might be something in the document that says CPREP, that's been removed. It's now called the referral process. So little things like that have changed, but the entire document as a whole, for the most part, has remained the same. And then the other question that I saw really quick is, Carlos, I think you asked if you could get a copy of the blank service coordination plan. If any of you would like a copy of the service coordination plan that was used today with our showing today, please reach out to your CRTF, one of us, one of your community corrections representatives. I'd be more than happy to send you a blank one, and we can get that to you if you don't have it.
Yeah. I'm noting everything in the chat too. Taylor, I'm not sure if we can save the chat just so that we can have this information moving forward, or if one of you has already saved it for me, I really appreciate it. But I think this was a really good meeting, and I really appreciate all of you being here. Please don't hesitate to contact myself, Taylor, or Melinda with any questions you have about today's presentation. If you need any information that we referenced today, whether it be a CCDS required fields document, the cheat sheet that I like to call it, which is, where you can see what documentation is needed for your CRTF participants, or the guidance document, or the service coordination plan, please don't hesitate to reach out to us individually, and we'll get you whatever you need. And this PowerPoint will be on the DCJS website, I would say within the next few weeks or so. And I just want to say thank you to the players today in the role play. Melinda, Frank, Taylor, and Ms. Sarah Donnellan from Docs. Thank you so much. And we appreciate your participation. Have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon. Thank you.